let's go ahead and get started. This is one of my favorite topics in the world. This is where I spent 20 years of my life working in construction safety management. It's really hard for me to restrain myself when I get to this topic because I could very easily turn the whole class into a construction class. And we do have an entire class that's just construction, and I'll talk about that at the very end of the video lectures for this unit. Some of you will end up going to work in construction safety management. Some of you won't. Some of you will end up working in general industry or maybe the healthcare industry or the entertainment industry. Pretty much every segment of our economy has opportunities for environmental health and safety managers. So there's a lot of opportunities. But some of you will end up in construction, some of you won't. Even if you don't, you still need to have an understanding of construction safety. Because even if you don't work in construction, let's say you work in general industry, you work for a company that manufactures trucks. Well, that company that manufactures trucks occasionally will have construction activities on their property. When any company has construction operations on their property, that company is partly responsible for whatever goes on, for the safety of the workers, for the safety of their company and the safety of the other companies involved. The owner has responsibility for whatever goes on their property, within their property's boundaries. And that's the perspective I'm using in this unit, looking at facility construction, looking at it from the perspective of a company that owns a construction project but is not a construction company. They have to manage construction companies that come onto their property. This will probably end up being 2 lectures. I'll probably not try to fit all of this into one video lecture. We'll probably split it into 2 lectures. I don't think we'll need more than 2 to get these main points in. Now keep in mind, we're just barely touching on the surface of construction safety, just to give you a feel for construction safety, what it's all about, some of the more important issues that are faced in construction projects from a safety standpoint, just to give you a taste of it. And again, like I said already, if anybody's interested in a full-blown construction safety class, we do have one. I will be talking about it at the very end of the video lectures for this unit. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. First thing I want to mention is the facility that you see there on the screen. That is Cardinal Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. And it's kind of close to my heart because the company I used to work for built this stadium. Kiewit Construction, the building district, built this stadium. I was not on the project. I wasn't even working for Kiewit when they built this project, but I kind of take some pride in ownership there because it was my former company that I enjoyed working for very much. It was a great company. And these are the kinds of projects that they would work on. It's not just bridges and highways, but it's dams and stadiums and office buildings and all sorts of construction. Power plants is a big thing for Kiewit. And they pretty much have their hands in every type of construction that you can imagine. Let's talk a little bit more about this stadium. Again, if this were a face-to-face class, I would ask this question. Does anybody know what is unique about this particular stadium? It was the first stadium that had this feature. Maybe the only stadium that has this feature. Probably not, though. You may be able to see it in the picture here. This stadium is a dome, but it has a natural grass playing surface. What they do with the natural grass surface when there's not a game going on, they slide it back out into this area on rollers. Grass needs sun, so to provide grass with the sun that it needs, they slide the whole field on rollers back out into this area where it can get the sun that it needs to be healthy and grow properly. Game time, they roll it back into the stadium, play the game, or whatever event's going on. And kind of unique for stadiums. Another question, facilities like this, we really need to pay maybe more attention to safety of the facility than maybe we do with other types of buildings or facilities. Why would we need to make sure that we are providing a safe facility with the stadium, more so than with a house or a manufacturing facility? Well, the answer to that is we have customers. We have fans coming into the stadium. Fans can trip and fall. Fans can fall over railings and fall 50 feet to the ground and die. And that happens just about every year. You hear about it in baseball more than football, but just about every year there's a fan that falls out of the upper deck onto the lower level surface and they die or are severely injured. Those types of considerations have to be worked into the design of the facility. They have to design the facility so that it is safe for the people who are visiting that facility. The stairs have to be built a certain way. The escalators, the railings on any upper levels, the bathrooms have to be built a certain way to improve safety for the customers who are visiting the facility. In pretty much any building that entertains the public or that hosts the public, members of the public, that's an important standard that you have to think about. Building it safe for the people who are visiting your building, your stadium, your whatever it might be. But let's go ahead and move on. I said we're looking at this from the project owner's perspective. If a company was hiring a contractor to build a new facility, they must consider the issues discussed in this unit. Now they could hire a third party to manage their construction project. That's okay, but the owner is still responsible. Like I said before, and I don't want to beat this horse too much more, the owner is responsible for whatever goes on their property, whether it's construction, the normal manufacturing process, or whatever it may be. The owner's responsible. If there's a construction project on their property, they're going to be involved. They're going to potentially have liability for that accident. They may be involved in lawsuits from that accident, so they have to manage it. Also, like I said previously, some of you, even if you don't go to work for a construction company, you will be involved in managing construction projects. So you need at least a taste of construction safety, which that's what we're providing in this particular unit. When we have a construction project, there are a number of different entities or players that are involved in that project. Let's talk about who's involved in the project. Of course, the project owner. They have the money that's paying for the building or the stadium or whatever it is to be built. They're involved, and they're at the very top of the list when it comes to responsibility, when it comes to having liability for whatever goes on their project. There's a project design team made up of engineers and architects, and it should involve safety professionals also, and in many cases it does, but in some cases it doesn't. But the project design team is an important player in the construction project. Then we have the general contractor / project manager. The general contractor / project manager, they are the company that kind of makes sure all of the construction is done properly. Now sometimes it's separate. Sometimes you'll have a project management team that's separate from the general contractor. But what we're seeing more and more of in the industry is the project manager is the general contractor, and they're the boots on the ground responsible for the project. In the project design team, the project owner, they're not out there every day. The general contractor, the project management people, they're out there every day making sure the project's getting done correctly making sure it's on time, on schedule, and that they're staying within budget. Again, as I have it here, they organize the work. That's a simple way of thinking about the general contractor. Now, subcontractors, they are the companies that work under the general contractor, and they are the companies that do most of the actual building that takes place. And on a big contract, a big project like the Cardinal Stadium, there might be 100 subcontractors on that project, all working under the guidance and supervision of the general contractor. You're going to have a contractor that just does electrical. You're going to have a contractor just for the plumbing. You're going to have a contractor for painting, for the concrete. On that Glendale Stadium project, you're going to have a contractor that just does the grass for the field, and that builds that roller table that the field rolls in and out on. Actually, I think Kiewit Crews actually did most of that. They were the general contractor, and I think they also did the actual construction work, or most of the construction work, for that roller table that the field rolled in and out on. But it can be a lot of different subcontractors. There can be subcontractors with 5 employees on a big project, or there could be subcontractors with 105 employees. The size of the subcontractor can vary quite a bit depending on the project. There can be 20, 25, 30 or more companies or agencies involved in a single large construction project. It could be a lot more. I mentioned 100 subcontractors. That's not out of the realm of possibility that there could be that many subcontractors. In addition to these entities that I have over here, there are also going to be government agencies involved. There's going to be the City Planning Commission, the City Council. OSHA is going to have an involvement. Again, they're not going to be there every day, but there's always a chance they could show up and make themselves self-involved in the project. The Department of Environmental Quality could be involved. Other government agencies as well. These are just a few examples of government agencies that could end up being involved with a construction project. Let's take a look at what really is the most dangerous industry there is. Let's take a look at some of the numbers, some of the statistics that go along with the construction industry. Again, more fatalities than any other industry. 1,008 in 2018, and I do need to update my information here, but the number has not changed significantly since 2018. We're still around 1,000. Some years a little above, some years a little under. But that's way ahead of any other company or any other industry that's out there. It's not even close. These are the types of incidents that resulted in the greatest number of fatalities. These are fatality events and exposures. Falls, slips, and trips. In 2018, there were 334 fatalities from falls. Transportation, 250, or about 25% of all the fatalities. Transportation, and we've talked about this a little bit before. We're talking about traffic in the work zone. We're talking about employees traveling in company vehicles, those types of things. Contact with objects or equipment, getting struck by or caught in between equipment or other objects. Construction now I said it's the most dangerous industry, and I say that because it's the industry where they have the greatest number of fatalities. But when you look at the fatality rate, it's only the 4th highest, or 4th most dangerous. Agriculture, forestry, and fishing has the highest rate of fatalities of any industry. 23 fatalities for every 100,000 workers. Transportation and warehousing, trucking and warehousing, 14 fatalities for every 100,000 workers. Mining, oil and gas, 12.9. Construction, 9.5. So again, construction is the 4th most dangerous when you look at the rate, but it's the most dangerous when you look at the raw number. And the raw number is so much higher than other industries than say agriculture or mining, because there are more workers involved in the construction industry. It's a much bigger industry than mining or agriculture, or transportation. Manufacturing, it's way down there, 2.2. Only 2.2 fatalities for every 100,000 workers. Again, this is where a lot of our graduates end up working, is in the manufacturing industry. And it's a little bit easier than some of these other industries. It's inherently safer. I mean, there are hazards. There's still the potential for fatality and injury, but it's not to the same level as we see in the top 4 industries that I have here. All of these data, by the way, are from the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2018. Yeah, do need to update it, but there hasn't been a lot of variation over the years in these numbers. These are what we call the Fatal 4 or the Focus 4 in construction. This is an OSHA term. OSHA calls it the Focus 4. Anytime a company or anytime a trainer does an OSHA 30 for construction class, they have to cover these Focus 4 topics. And these are the top 4 killers of construction workers: falls, struck by, caught in between, and electricity. Let's talk a little bit about each of these. The falls that occur, many of the falls that are fatal are from falls less than 6 feet, and a large percentage are less than 10 feet. You don't have to be 100 feet up in the air for a fall to be fatal. Many fatalities occur at much lower levels, again 10 feet or even 6 feet. Struck by is an injury that occurs when a worker is struck by an object, a falling, rolling, or flying object. And with the struck by, it's a struck by because it's the getting struck by that causes the injury. When the girder falls on the worker, it's the girder hitting the worker that causes the injury. And I mention that, or I clarify that, because people get struck by confused with caught in between. Caught in between is when an injury occurs because the worker is pinched or crushed between 2 or more objects. Worker may not be injured by the object touching them or hitting them, but the injury occurs, or the fatality occurs, because they're pinched or crushed between 2 or more objects. Again, struck by, it's getting struck by the object that causes the injury. Caught in between, it's getting pinched between objects that causes the injury. Electricity, about 50% of the fatalities in construction that involve electricity are the result of overhead power lines, contact with overhead power lines. And if you look at all industries, the most dangerous thing about electricity is overhead power lines. A forklift or a crane or a other piece of equipment, a scaffold being too close to the overhead power lines, those are all circumstances that can be fatal for the workers. Now, one thing that's not on here are transportation incidents involving motor vehicles. Now, this is not included in OSHA's Focus 4 hazards because transportation incidents are not regulated by OSHA. And because it's not regulated by OSHA, it's ignored by some companies. Again, companies that have vehicles have to pay attention to transportation incidents. If they don't, they're going to pay for it. If they don't have some measures in place to control these types of accidents, they're going to pay for it. Now here's another breakdown of statistics, and this focuses on transportation. Now these aren't OSHA data. These are our Bureau of Labor Statistics data. These are the top 3 killers according to Bureau of Labor Statistics data in all construction. Falls, about 36%. Transportation, about 25%. Caught by, or caught in between, struck by, about 18%. And I won't go into all the numbers because I've kind of addressed this before in a previous unit. Yeah, but I will mention this is for 16 years of data, 2003 through 2018. And if you look at the data closely, you'll see that the patterns are pretty consistent over time. The percentages, especially the percentage of fatalities that are transportation related, ranges from, looks like, a low of 24.1 to a high of 27.14. A fairly narrow range. Same thing when we look at falls, a very narrow range when you look at the percentage of fatalities that are fall related. Caught in between, struck by, same thing. And what I'm doing here, I'm leaving out electricity because there's a very small number, even though it's on the Focus 4, there's a relatively small number of fatalities related to electricity in construction. It is the fourth deadliest, but it's not as deadly as these three categories that we have here: transportation, falls, and contact with objects, equipment. Now, if we break this down more specifically to a particular segment of the construction industry, like the highway and bridge sector, then we see it changes up a little bit. In the highway and bridge sector, which we've talked about before, about 69% of fatalities are transportation related. Only about 6% are fall related. About 17%, about the same as for all construction, are related to contact with object or equipment. So if you do end up in the construction industry and you want to do a risk assessment and you want to use data for that risk assessment, look at specific data for the type of construction that you do. If you do highway construction, look at the highway sector. If you do commercial construction, look at the commercial sector. Residential construction, look at the residential construction sector. And you can find specific data on each of those sectors. Yeah, I don't want to wear you out with all the data, all the numbers, but here's another chart that shows the number of fatalities for each of the major industries. Again, construction's at the top, transportation, warehousing. Then it's got an industry that maybe you haven't heard of. It's a category of industries, professional and business services. And it's third on the list when you look at number of fatalities. It's third on the list primarily because it's such a big category. And here are all the different industries, all the different types of businesses that fall into this category of professional and business services. And it includes disinfecting and pest control services, which can be dangerous. It includes outdoor advertising, putting up big billboards, those types of things. That can be dangerous. Building, cleaning, and maintenance services, that could also be dangerous. Medical equipment rental, heavy construction equipment rental and leasing, and so on. Some of the different businesses that fall into this category you wouldn't think of as being that dangerous, but some of them are, and that's why we have such a high number here for professional business services. It also includes detective, guard, and armored car services. Pretty dangerous industry as well. Let's see if there's anything else that stands out. Anyhow, I just thought I would throw that in there since you may have not seen this category before. Then we have agriculture, forestry, hunting, government, and so on. And don't want to wear you out with all the numbers. So let's go ahead and move on to more numbers. Another bar chart, a horizontal bar chart. This shows the rate. And in this chart, the industries aren't in order. We have the different rates for the different industries. Again, the safest industry would be government work, followed by retail trade, followed by manufacturing, leisure, hospitality. Then the most dangerous, of course, that we've already talked about, including construction. A lot of injuries, a lot of fatalities. You don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I think you're getting the picture that construction's a dangerous business. It's one of the toughest safety management jobs there is because it's dangerous. But these are, again, data from 2018. It's estimated there were 77,490 injuries in construction. These are serious injuries. These aren't smashing your thumb with a hammer. These aren't your minor scrapes or cuts, those types of things. These are injuries serious enough that they required medical care, or they required the worker to miss days away from work. Again, lost time injuries. That's what we're talking about. A lost time injury is an injury that requires a worker to miss work. They can't work because of the injury until they heal up and get better. And construction's dangerous. It's a challenging industry. Let's talk about some of the unique safety challenges in construction. It's inherently dangerous work. There's a constant exposure to what I call high energy hazards, which goes along with Haddon's energy control theory. Haddon believed that we can make the workplace safe by controlling energy in the workplace. Well, in construction, that's really hard because everything's high energy. Everything's big. You're working way up in the air, which has a lot of potential in it. Energy. Again, heavy equipment, heavy materials, a lot of energy's involved. Very powerful tools, very powerful equipment's involved. Another safety challenge in construction is the way that companies get work, how a construction company gets a construction job. It's a competitive process where they're bidding against other companies. And generally speaking, the company that has the lowest bid and they promise to get the job done in the lowest number of days, they get the project. It's not about who has the safest company. It's not about who does the best construction work. It's about who is the cheapest and who can do it the fastest. When you're hiring companies because they're cheap and fast, there is a lot of room to cut corners. There's a lot of shortcuts that can be taken. Safety is often the corner that's cut when we talk about cutting corners. There's this competitive bid process is the opposite of what we would like to see as safety managers. This detracts from the emphasis on safety. It's all about doing it as cheaply as possible and getting it done as quickly as possible. Neither one of those things are good when it comes to safe projects. But there are companies that can have the low bid and can do it the fastest, and they still do it safely. But a lot of companies out there, it's all about the money, it's all about the schedule, and safety comes in third place at best. This can end up long hours, long weeks, and worker fatigue. A lot of pressure on the workers in this industry, and part of it is because of this emphasis on controlling costs and doing it fast. One of the highest rates of suicide among all industries is construction workers. Not all of it is because of the stress of the stresses that I've talked about. There are other things involved, but construction workers do have one of the highest rates of suicide. And that also is a challenge for someone who works in construction management. We have to consider the mental health of our workforce also. We don't want workers committing suicide. I've had one pretty close acquaintance commit suicide, construction worker. Had another acquaintance that I wasn't as close to. We don't know for sure that his was suicide or not, but we think it may have been. It was the second guy. He died in a one-car accident, and after the fact, it was found out that he had just lost a lot of money at a casino, and he had financial problems and home problems and all that. So again, it could have been an accident. It could have been a suicide. Now the first guy, there was a gun involved, so it was pretty clear-cut that it was a suicide. So if you end up working in this industry, that's something you might have to deal with as well. Now, that's not the employer's responsibility. Now, when a worker commits suicide at their home, the employer is not going to be fined. Of course, it affects the company, and it affects everyone who works for the company. But as far as being responsible from a liability or OSHA standpoint, the company's not responsible. And you as a safety manager wouldn't be responsible either. But having said that, in the industry, we still need to pay attention to our workers' mental health. This goes along, I think, with the mental health, the mobile workforce and the mobile job sites. Construction workers are moving around the country. They may spend a month here and a month there, or 6 months here and a month and 6 months across the country. Always moving around takes its toll on the workers, but it also makes it hard for companies to monitor the safety on the job site. It's harder for safety professionals to stay on top of the project. It's harder for them to provide the assistance that they can provide if the crews are always moving around on them. Where this is really challenging is if it's a small subcontractor, say 200 employees, and they have 8 to 10 man crews that are going all over the region, where they may be on one job one day and another job the next day. That is really hard for the safety manager to keep up with that. All these people moving around everywhere. And if it's hard for the safety manager to keep up with it, that's going to affect safety performance. Exposure to the elements. Oh, one thing more I want to say about mobile workforce, and I want to contrast this with general industry. Sorry, this is an important point to consider. Again, construction, we're moving around. General industry, manufacturing, safety manager has one location they're responsible for. They have an office. They can go out onto the factory floor each day. It's the same factory floor every day, the same workers every day. It's pretty much the same day after day after day. There's no travel involved. It's a little bit less challenging. Some would even say it's boring. I wouldn't say that it was boring, but the challenges are different. And I think the challenges are maybe a little easier in general industry than what we face in the construction industry. Speaking of differences, general industry, you don't have workers working out in the middle of a thunderstorm. You don't have them exposed to lightning or heat, wind, cold, or sun like we have in construction. Of course, there may be some of that in some manufacturing, but for the most part, manufacturing does not have employees exposed to these types of hazards. Construction, it's almost an everyday thing. One of my greatest fears as a safety manager in construction had to do with lightning. In bridge construction, we have steel framed substructures that the bridge deck sits on. Workers have to get out there on that steel frame. If a thunderstorm develops while they're out there on that steel support structure, if lightning strikes that steel support structure, you could have multiple men killed in just a split second. To counteract that hazard, or in an effort to control that hazard, the better companies out there, they will have policies about when the job has to shut down. When lightning is in the area. At Hewitt, lightning within 6 miles, we would shut down the job. And there wasn't any questioning it. If there was lightning detected within 6 miles, you had to shut down the job. And there are such things as lightning detectors that you can use to help detect lightning. Another thing challenging about construction is the people. The guys and women. I talk a lot about the guys and men, but there are women in construction also. More and more women each year go into construction. But even the women are different. Even the women tend to be have a higher risk tolerance, be more risk takers. They tend to be more competitive, not good with authority. Maybe have kind of an outlaw, rough and tumble lifestyle. Also. The people that you see on a construction site, and I'm laughing thinking about this because some of my best friends are who I'm picturing right now. They're a different breed. They are a whole different animal than what you see in your average factory. You got to learn how to deal. They're good people. They're really rough around the edges, but they're good people. But the people, especially this risk-taking personality, this high risk tolerance. You see more of that in construction than you see in many other industries. The workers or people who may be hired into construction that don't have high risk tolerance, they often don't last very long in the industry because of the dangers. They can't tolerate the dangers. These high risk tolerance people, they're okay with the danger. The low risk tolerance workers, a lot of times don't last as long in the industry. They don't hang around, leaving you with more of the risk taker type personalities. Also, something that we fight in construction, and this is changing, is a tradition of taking chances and ignoring hazards. It's always kind of been the tough guys industries where all the tough guys go to work, and tough women, and it's dangerous, and we know it's dangerous, but we don't care. We ignore the hazards. We know we have to take chances to get the job done, and we're okay with that. That tradition is very solid in the construction industry even to this day, but it has relaxed over the years. Much more of a safety mentality now than there was 24 years ago when I started in the construction industry. Again, comparing construction to general industry. When it comes to safety and safety culture, I would say overall construction is about 20 years behind general industry as far as getting to the point that it needs to be. Construction still has a long ways to go, even though it's getting better. Now, going along with this tradition of taking chances, there's this tough guy culture. There's this no sissies out here tough guy culture. Again, here we're talking about guys again. Some of the toughest guys I've ever seen are women in construction. Very tough. You don't mess with them kind of women in construction. Very independent, very intelligent, willing to do what needs to be done to get the job done. But this culture, this tough guy culture, also leads to challenges in construction. And examples that I've heard over the years that indicate the existence of this culture. You don't need a water break, suck it up. If he can't take it, we'll find someone who can. I heard that from superintendents. Also, the thing about the water breaks. When I first started, superintendents, they didn't want to have water jugs or water cans for the crews. They don't need water. And it hasn't been that long ago that was the mentality. But again, this is changing. I think it's still a couple of more generations away before most of it to disappear, but it is disappearing. And you get into the bigger companies with the more highly developed safety cultures like Kiewit and AECOM and Bechtel and Balfour Beatty, CH2M Hill. This is not completely absent, but it's not as present as you'll find in other companies, smaller companies. And there's a reason the big guys are the big guys, and have that they've learned that it's important to take safety seriously. It's important to support safety within the corporation, and that trickles down from the top to everybody in the company. But I do need to add, you'll still run across these mentalities even in companies like Kiewit. I don't want to go into detail here, but I ran into it a couple of times where I would have really serious conversations with superintendents about a dangerous operation, and they just didn't understand why it was dangerous, even though it was obvious to anyone that it was dangerous. But again, they're risk takers, high risk tolerance. It didn't seem dangerous to them. So, but we got it worked out. We've already touched upon this, the focus or the prime focus risks and hazards in construction. I want to go into a little more detail, talking about the major concerns in construction safety management: transportation of vehicles, equipment, dozers, cranes, forklifts we've talked about, falls, working up in the air or working on a scaffold or working on a ladder, overhead power lines, ergonomics, and with ergonomics, let me just simplify ergonomics as being related to muscle strains and sprains and those types of injuries, overexertion injuries, trying to lift too much and a worker strains their back. That's not strictly speaking ergonomics, but for our purpose here, that's what we're talking about, or that's what I'm talking about when I use the term ergonomics. Again, a back sprain or something along those lines. Carpal tunnel syndrome, which is fairly common in construction. Tennis elbow or carpenter's elbow, also ergonomic types of injuries that are common in construction. Walking and working surfaces that lead to slips and trips, another important hazard to consider for construction managers, construction safety managers. Falling, flying objects, a lot of heavy stuff that can fall, a lot of heavy stuff that can go flying through the air. Sharp edges and tools. Heat and cold, you're exposed to the heat, you're exposed to the cold, depending on the time of the year. Different types of structural deficiencies. Excavations can cave in. Temporary structures, structures under construction can cave in or collapse. And I'll talk about an example or show you a picture of an example of one of these as we move through this unit. Then we have the different substances that workers can be exposed to in construction. Silica, lead, asbestos, carbon monoxide, H2S, hydrogen sulfide, and also there's the potential for oxygen deficiency in certain work areas. This does not represent all of the hazards that are faced in construction. But if a company, if a construction safety manager can get a handle on these hazards, on these issues, that's going to have a drastic effect on the safety performance of the company. Get these under control, there won't be nearly as many injuries, there won't likely be fatalities if you can effectively control these hazards, these work circumstances, these issues. All right, we are about 20 minutes in. I'm going to go ahead and take a break here. We'll come back in video 2 and talk about owner risk, liability, and damages. Again, we're talking about construction from the owner's perspective. But take a break right now. I'll see you in the next video.